So, talking about C-189 and then also the work that we've been doing here on the recommendation on the transition, formalizing the informal economy. You mentioned in our workshop sort of this is an additional tool to be used along with C-189.
The national, yeah.
What kind of gains do you see this recommendation for domestic workers and then maybe other informal workers?
I think one way, the gains that it made for domestic workers is that domestic workers was never recognized as domestic work is decent work. All of a sudden, even in my own country, you notice every year people used to celebrate domestic decent work day, and every year domestic workers was never part of it. But since the year 2012, all of a sudden domestic workers was now invited in decent work for the decent work day, and you find that domestic worker could actually speak at that decent work. Secondly, you find that within some of the clauses, it was very weak within your own national laws, and what you could do, you could go and you could speak to your government and say, but look, that clause is very weak. And then, like in South Africa now, they're reviewing the maternity benefits for domestic workers, they're reviewing the severance pay, long severance pay for domestic workers, they're also reviewing a different contract for domestic workers, and currently we're now discussing the Compensation Act, which should come into effect in the next 3 months. Now, if there wasn't something that we could use it to, so we could use Convention 189 to say to our government, no, wait, you were part of that, you signed Convention 189, so what is now, keeping you from not actually listening to us? So I think this is what Convention 189, the other thing Convention 189 is also opening, it is actually opening that they are looking more at decent wages for domestic workers. Before we were simply looking at a minimum wage is there for domestic workers. Now people are starting to ask, what is a minimum living wage? What is actually a wage for a domestic worker? Yes, a minimum wage protects us. A minimum wage say, at least, you have to have the minimum. But then we say, we have now started also a sort of campaign, my worth, what am I worth as a domestic worker? How much is our worth? And what we did is we asked somebody to investigate, what are my value and my worth. A domestic worker, what do you do from the morning to the afternoon? What is all, besides cleaning, there's a lot of other things you do. And then we add the value to the work and we find, you are much more worth than the minimum wage. So I think Convention 189 has actually, paved the way for us for negotiations, and we actually set up meetings with those people in authority. I think that is the way. And traveling in the world, and also traveling the world and seeing that yes, we are somehow fortunate in South Africa. We have exploiting, but not so bad like other countries. It also strengthened me in saying no. We are, like Dan Galan was saying, Myrtle, you have only started on the road again. And it's showing us that there's still a long road. And it's not about 20 countries signing Convention 189. It's about how am I going to empower myself and other domestic workers, how will we empower ourselves to know that Convention 189 with the recommendations is working for us.
And what value do you think that this new recommendation on the transition will have for
the informal?
Workers?
I think that before, it was just like, it was something that was discussed in countries. It was something that was said, the informal workers must be recognized. But at least this recommendations will give some strength. It will add some value too. Now, for instance, if we have this where they're saying, for instance, they say, let's clear the pavement, the space, let's clear it. You can go to the recommendations that wait. Not if it's going to destroy the livelihood of the people standing. So now again, education come, mobilization come. Because if that people on that pavement does not know there's such a clause or such a recommendation, how will they benefit? They will just simply allow these authorities to throw their stuff, take their stuff, because they don't know there is some recommendation, some clause. So I think this is also, so the domestic workers with the Convention 189 and the recommendations that are coming out, we can actually put it together. And that is why we're saying now, we should actually start working more with the informal sector now, because the domestic workers is a step ahead, but we can now say to you, look, this is how we should, let us work together and let us assist each other. Because when we had the ILO meeting now, before we came here, and I met some of the street vendors, and they were actually saying to me, Myrtle, please will your organization also come on board? And I said, when we come back, we will now talk about how we can assist it. And I think that is important. If you also, again, if we're not going to know the recommendations, if we're not going to understand the recommendations, it's not going to make sense for us. We were fighting about gender violence. You know, it's been a fight all our life. At least there was the impact here that it did come in, even if they changed it a little bit, but it's there. But that can also affect other workers now. It can also be used to strengthen the Convention 189 in a way that the recommendations all filter into each other. And I think that is what is important, is that we need to set up the 5-year plan, yes, also on, but we also need to see how we don't separate the issues from each other. That the Convention 189 and the recommendations of the come together now, and it forms a strong, how do you say, labor laws that's going to protect those workers, because after all, domestic workers are also vulnerable. They are also, although we've got these labor laws, we're still vulnerable workers, we're still exposed. And I think this is how we can actually become a great team.